Today, the United States bombed Kharg Island. Kharg Island is a 5-mile stretch of land off the Iranian coast in the Persian Gulf. It handles approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. It had been untouched for 14 days, while every other military target in the country was being systematically struck. President Trump announced it personally, calling it one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East. Within hours, Iran responded. Not with missiles, not with drones, with a sentence. A senior Iranian official told CNN that Iran is considering allowing a limited number of oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, on the condition that the oil cargo is traded in Chinese yuan, not dollars, yuan. That sentence, delivered on the same day that the United States struck Iran's primary oil export terminal, is the most consequential development of this entire 14-day war. Not because of what it does to oil prices, because of what it targets. The yuan condition is not an energy policy. It is a direct strike on the financial architecture that has underwritten American global power since 1974, and it landed without a single missile being fired. Here is what you need to understand about why this matters so much, and why the coverage has almost entirely missed it. The petrodollar system was born in 1974 from an agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Oil, the commodity that every economy on Earth requires to function, would be priced and traded exclusively in US dollars. In exchange, the United States provided Saudi Arabia with security guarantees and weapons. The arrangement then extended across OPEC. It created something that no other nation in history has possessed: structural global demand for the dollar that exists independently of American economic performance. Every country that needs oil must first acquire dollars to buy it. That permanent demand is what allows the United States to run persistent trade deficits, borrow cheaply, and project financial power globally without the constraints that limit every other economy. The petrodollar system has survived oil shocks, the 2008 financial crisis, the rise of China, and 50 years of geopolitical turbulence. It has never been seriously disrupted at the point of the Strait of Hormuz, until today. Iran's yuan condition changes the mathematics of the system in a way that no sanctions, no military threat, and no diplomatic pressure has previously achieved. Here is the mechanism. If tankers must pay in yuan to transit Hormuz, the waterway through which 27% of the world's maritime oil trade passes according to the U.S. Congressional Research Service, then every energy importer who needs Gulf oil must acquire yuan before acquiring oil. China becomes the financial intermediary for the most critical energy corridor on Earth. Dollar demand for oil transactions contracts. Yuan demand expands. And the self-reinforcing loop that has sustained dollar reserve dominance for half a century develops a leak at its most critical point. This is what Iran just proposed in the middle of a war, on the day the United States struck its primary oil terminal. But that is not the real pressure point. Because the yuan condition did not arrive in isolation, it arrived alongside a series of confirmed developments today that together describe a conflict whose economic dimension has now overtaken its military one. Trump bombed Kharg Island and threatened to strike its oil infrastructure directly if Iran continues blocking Hormuz. Brent crude has risen 41.5% since the war began on February 28th. That is the largest energy price surge since the 1970s oil crisis, confirmed by the Wikipedia Strait of Hormuz crisis article updated today. Tanker traffic through Hormuz has dropped to near zero. Over 150 ships are anchored outside the strait waiting. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced today a temporary authorization allowing countries to purchase Russian oil currently stranded at sea, an emergency measure designed to replace the Gulf supply that is no longer moving. Read that last development carefully. The United States just temporarily lifted Russia oil sanctions during an active war with Iran because the Hormuz closure has created a supply gap that the American government cannot fill through any other available mechanism. The Kremlin confirmed the same day that Moscow and Washington are discussing cooperation on energy market stabilization. Russia, which the United States has spent 3 years sanctioning and isolating, is now a partner in managing the economic consequences of the conflict the United States started. That is not a strategic coincidence. That is the energy leverage architecture that Iran's Hormuz strategy was designed to produce. Here is the specific actor dynamic that connects all of these developments and that general coverage has not assembled into a single picture. China has not fired a single shot in this conflict. It has not deployed a ship, a drone, or a diplomatic intervention. It has simply waited. And what China is positioned to receive, if Iran's yuan condition is formalized, is the most significant expansion of yuan oil trade in history, delivered not by Chinese diplomacy or economic pressure, but by an American military operation that China had no role in starting. Every barrel of oil that flows through Hormuz, denominated in yuan rather than dollars, is a barrel that reduces structural global demand for the currency China has spent 20 years trying to displace from its reserve dominance position. Iran just offered China that outcome as a condition of reopening the world's most important energy corridor. The unexpected connection that nobody is mapping: Washington temporarily lifted Russia sanctions today to stabilize oil markets. Moscow is now discussing energy market cooperation with Washington, and Tehran is simultaneously offering China yuan oil trade through Hormuz. Three adversaries of the United States are each receiving a different form of strategic benefit from the same American military operation, simultaneously in the same week. Iran is not winning the military exchange of this conflict. The United States has struck over 6,000 targets. Iran's missile volume is confirmed down 90%. Its navy has been effectively eliminated from the Persian Gulf. Kharg Island was struck today. But Iran does not need to win the military exchange to win the strategic one. Iran needs to make the economic cost of continuation exceed the domestic political tolerance in Washington. Brent at $100, Russian sanctions lifted, UN oil trade proposed, energy market cooperation with Moscow. These are not military defeats. They are structural shifts in the architecture of American global financial power, and they have been achieved without Iran winning a single conventional military engagement. Here is where the analysis becomes more complex, because Trump's Kharg Island strike and Iran's yuan response reveal the specific strategic trap that the next phase of this conflict is building toward. If the United States does not reopen Hormuz, oil prices continue to rise toward levels that produce a domestic political reckoning. The Congressional Research Service confirmed today that even without a complete physical closure, Iranian threats alone have produced closure-like conditions because tanker operators have concluded the risk exceeds the reward. This is the leverage Iran possesses regardless of whether it wins any military engagement. If the United States attempts to escort tankers through Hormuz by force, which Trump said he believes will happen soon, U.S. naval vessels enter a corridor that the CENTCOM commander himself confirmed is too dangerous right now. Each escort operation exposes destroyers to the mine threat, the coastal missile threat, and the drone swarm threat simultaneously. The military cost of reopening Hormuz could exceed the economic cost of keeping it closed. There is no clean option. And if Iran's yuan condition gains traction among energy importers, India's tankers have already been passing through selectively while Western vessels have been stopped, the reopening of Hormuz happens on terms that permanently redirect a portion of global oil trade away from the dollar framework. The strait reopens. The petrodollar system does not fully recover. Three indicators to watch in the next 72 hours. Whether any major energy importer publicly signals willingness to trade in yuan for Hormuz passage. India is the most likely first mover. It has continued receiving Iranian oil throughout this conflict. If India confirms yuan-denominated transactions as a condition of Hormuz access, other Asian importers will follow. China will gain the oil trade architecture it has sought for 2 decades, delivered by an American military campaign. Whether Trump follows through on the threat to strike Kharg Island's oil infrastructure directly. Trump threatened it today if Iran continues blocking ships. Kharg handles 90% of Iranian oil exports. Striking the infrastructure rather than the military targets means destroying Iran's primary source of revenue, and simultaneously removing the supply that China, India, and the global south depend on. That decision would accelerate the economic fracture it is intended to prevent, and whether the temporary Russian oil sanctions waiver extends beyond its current 30-day window. If it does, it confirms that the Hormuz disruption is structural rather than temporary, and that the United States has made a strategic decision to reintegrate Russian oil into global markets as the price of managing the energy consequences of the Iran campaign. 14 days ago, the United States launched what it described as a campaign to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat. Today, it bombed Iran's primary oil export terminal and temporarily lifted sanctions on Russian oil. Iran responded by proposing UN-denominated oil trade through the world's most critical maritime choke point. The petrodollar system has survived for 52 years. It has never been stressed at this specific pressure point before, and the country that most benefits from its weakening has not had to do anything except wait. Watch what happens in the next 72 hours, because the most consequential shot fired in this war today did not come from a bomber. It came from a sentence spoken to a CNN reporter about how oil might be allowed to flow again.